Testing 1, 2, testing for the JWB Finance Committee meeting.
Sure, thank you. Good morning. You have before you a memo to approve the fiscal '22 budget changes, and we are presenting the changes that have occurred between the last time the board reviewed the preliminary budget, which was at the July 8th, 21 board meeting. So, as you're aware, the certified tax values were provided to staff on July 1, and that reflected about a 6.5% increase in our total taxable value, which resulted in $5.5 million in increase in property taxes. That, along with the change in our budget relative to the collection of those taxes from a 95% collection to 97%, that provided us with a $6.9 million increase in revenues from fiscal '21. On the expenditure side, the preliminary budget that was provided had the detail between all the programs. We organized that relative to the new strategic focus areas, and we continue to use the same format that we did last year, where we had a column that included comments so that you could see what the changes were between fiscal '21 and the proposed fiscal '22. Attached to your memo, you've got a detailed summary of the changes that were made. The total net changes to the preliminary budget for the expenditures are $830,000. And on the revenue side, the only change was relative to the change in the fund balance that has occurred internally with fiscal '21, which will roll over into the fiscal '22 budget. Also attached, you have the updated schedules for the revenues, the administrative expenses, the detail budget, as well as the alphabetical budget with the programs that we fund and the agencies. And this will be culminated along with Beth's transmittal letter and a few other items when we get ready to publish the budget workbook. And I will turn it back over to the chair for questions.
Are there any questions for Laura? Seeing none, this is for us to approve to take it to the board, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve this FY '22 budget changes?
So move.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. It's approved. Let's move on then to adopting FY '22 JWB Finance Committee schedule, meeting schedule.
Good morning,
Those
yes.
on- Go ahead.
Thank you. I thought it would be beneficial if we could attempt to get the meeting dates on our calendars prior to the fiscal year in an effort to just make sure that we don't have the back and forth between adding a meeting and canceling a meeting. I know last year we did have several more Finance Committee meetings, but that was due to the Audit Services RFP that we had issued and the Finance Committee, who served as the Auditor Selection Committee. So the meetings that we have proposed for next fiscal year would include the February meeting, and that is when the auditors come and present their findings and conclusions relative to the audit. The other meetings that we are proposing are April, June, and August, and those are all for purposes of the budget. I have used the dates that were somewhat correlate with the board meetings, so we have a little bit of time between the board and the actual Finance Committee. And these would all be on a Thursday. I know that the Pinellas County work sessions are on Thursdays. However, you don't have those dates yet. It's my understanding, Commissioner Seal. But I would at least like to just get these on the calendar. We can certainly make changes as we move forward.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
There's a hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry, Commissioner Seal.
The only comment I would make is we don't have our schedule yet, but we typically have work sessions on Thursdays now for the county commission. So if that's the case, and that we've already run into that this year with even JWB board meetings, so a county commissioner would probably not be able to be a part of Finance Committee and further would miss some JWB meetings.
So that would
Just
mean
FYI.
all months. I mean, all of the meetings would be impacted by that.
Commissioner Seal, are those work session meetings usually in the morning at 9 a.m.? I'm sorry? Are the meetings normally at 9 a.m.?
Are they 9 a.m.?
Okay. So we could maybe move ours to
Well,
afternoon?
what if we, yeah, I was going to say, in the past, the finance committees were all around 1:30 or 2. Would that help?
Probably, it just depends on what's on the agenda for the work session. So, I mean, I don't know whether you really want to change it because of what I just said. I just wanted you to be aware of it. I do not plan on being on the finance committee next year anyway.
I understand that. But it is, I think it is important
But there may
to have-
be another
Yes.
each year, a county commissioner is appointed to the Juvenile Welfare Board, so it may not necessarily be me next year.
But I think it's important that we have a county commissioner on the finance committee as well. So I'd like to propose that we move the meetings to a later time in the day, whether that's, and Laura, I'll leave that up to you, 1:30, 3 o'clock, whichever may be,
I think
based on everybody's schedule.
I think 1:30 would be fine.
Okay. Then allow the commissioners an opportunity to participate. If that's okay with everyone? All right, so should we wait to manage that or motion to accept that until after you have the dates? Or after you have the time set?
If you're gonna just keep these same dates, just change the 9 a.m. proposal to 1:30, you could vote today to set them, and then if you need to change them, you can.
Okay, so then do I have a motion to move the dates to, or leave the dates as they are, move the meeting times to 1:30? Do I have a motion? I have a motion, do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, so we'll just move those to 1:30. And we'll leave it at that. Okay. All right, it's discussion item, Finance Committee, financial and investment reports for June 2021 and July 2021. Laura?
Thank you. Yes, so before you, you have the internal financial statements for June and July, and I'm going to just focus on the July statements. You've got the highlights in your memo, but just in looking at the balance sheet, I just wanted a couple observations and comments that I would make. We continue to increase our cash and investments from a year ago. That is up about $46 million. We are looking at our investments and considering possibly investing in other areas, but that's just an observation on the financial statements. The liability, the biggest increase we have over the prior year is approximately $1 million, and that's due to the net pension liability. And the other changes on the balance sheet would be from the unassigned fund balance and your fund equity amounts. In looking at the income statement or the statement of revenues and expenditures, again, just a couple observations to point out to you. So this presentation shows the amended budget, and then I think we've mentioned before that we took a look at the budget to try to make it a little more realistic relative to when the expenses would be incurred, instead of just taking a 1/12 amount. So that's what the second column with the year-to-date budget is. Keeping in mind that this is a financial statement through July 31, which would be 10 months of our fiscal year, which would be approximately 83% of our budget. Looking at the revenue side, of course, our revenues are up, and with the collection rate coming in at 97% versus 95%, we've got an increase in revenues over the prior year of about $5 million, as I had mentioned earlier when we were speaking about the budget. The administrative expenses are in line with the prior year, not a significant change there. And on the program expenses, so although our spend is at 52% of our proposed budget, if you compare that to the budget that we took to really allocate the expenses when they would be spent, we're at 86% of that budget, which seems a little more realistic. And again, looking at the expenditures in the prior year, we're not that far off. We're off about $500,000 from the previous year. So we look at our total expenditures are at currently at $48.3 million, and a year ago it was at $48.3 million. So we're pretty much in line with what had occurred in the previous year as well. Following that, you've got the investment activity, the budget actual, and then the contracts that were awarded and signed in this particular month. And we are required to provide you the investment schedule where you can see how our investments are by institution as well as earnings. And if I have any questions on the statements, I'd be happy to address those as well.
Are there any questions for Laura? Seeing none, thank you very much. Beth, our Chief Executive Officer's report?
Sure. Most of these are just sort of previews so that, you've heard some of these things more than once. In the year, the life of JWB, this time of year, besides pulling the budget together, which you've heard, is also a time when we are completing contracts for all of our funded agencies. So there's an extraordinary amount of effort that goes into that process. I think every year it gets a little bit more efficient. And whereas 2 and 3 years ago, it was typical that every single agency came in and met with the contract team and walked through the contract. The last 2 years, I think last year and this year, we've given agencies the option, do you want to come in and have a specific meeting, or can you review the contract, see the tracked changes, and you're good. You can always call, you can always request a meeting. So there is a town hall, so to speak, for all of the providers, all of those we contract with, just to line out those changes in the contract that apply to everybody. But that can happen with everybody instead of all 80 agencies one-on-one. And so there really are a handful, I want to say less than 10 agencies who requested, and any agency can request, have requested one-on-one meetings. And I share that with you just to say it is a huge amount of effort as part of the processes that JWB goes through. And I really applaud our folks for trying to find ways to, meet the needs of our providers, be available to them as they need, but be as efficient as possible. Along those lines, similarly, and I think it's been an effort of multiple years, but we're finally implementing it, is the program finance and the program monitoring units and others put together what they called a risk matrix for our programs and risk to determine those programs that might be of such low risk, and I'll describe that in a minute, that we could do multi-year contracts with them. And understand, there's language in the contracts. We can terminate any contract should we need to. But often we go through this whole process for an agency we've worked with for 10 years, and they're just not risks that we need to sit and go over again and again. So the risks are in a variety of categories. One would be financial. So are they financially a stable organization? Are they audited? They didn't receive any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Likewise, are there submissions for reimbursement clean and good? But also covers things like, is the nature of the work that they do one-on-one with kids without other supervision? So that increases a different kind of risk. Something that would reduce risk to us is if they're accredited by somebody else and have, one or more, in many cases, other accrediting agencies that come in and review a whole raft of things. That would tend to reduce risk. So we have, I'm going to say 10 to 12 different factors in these different domains that our contract folks, along with our program finance folks, graded every one of our programs. And Laura, do you remember how many ended up in the multi-year contract bucket?
I don't, but I'm going to take a guess and say around 20.
Yeah,
maybe
it wasn't more than that.
Yeah, it was less than that.
It was between 10 and 20, I think. And it's just a way we can reduce effort, unrewarded effort, time that doesn't benefit the agencies, it doesn't benefit us. We still have all of the other oversight that we have. And so I really give our staff a lot of credit for it. It's been in the workings for a long time. They've been, as I say, they've been thinking about it a long time, but it finally came to fruition this year. Doesn't mean much unless you're one of those agencies who doesn't have to sweat going through the whole contract process again. But again, it reduces the work on our staff from doing something that nobody thought was really value added. And we're really trying to do that wherever we can. Nevertheless, that group's working pretty hard right now to pump out the contracts before October 1st. We had talked here and at the board table about when we thought we might return to work. Well, that was before the Delta variant. And the world has changed. And so we had our plan all ready to go. Linda's finger was all but on the send button. And, case rates have gone skyrocketing. So what we are currently saying relative to our employees who can work as effectively at home or more effectively out of the office, that return to the office will be January 1st or later. So we will obviously continue monitoring things. None of us know. There could be more variants. We all know that. The more the virus circulates in our environment or across the world, for that matter, there may be more variants. But I think in many ways we were looking forward to returning to the office. Our employees, as assessed, said they really liked working from home. They really liked not commuting. They liked being able to arrange their time more flexibly. And we saw that. This last year, they've been incredibly productive. But at the same time, as is said by many, there is something lost relative to the casual relationships between people. And so we don't do this without thinking about that as well, and wanting to find ways as best we can, even working virtually, to find ways to create those ways for relationships to go.
I just had a question. I know it's hard. This is probably extremely hard to predict, but unfortunately, we all know now that this variant is much more contagious for children. And I know, for example, at the Y of the Suncoast, which I'm on the board of, we have seen a lot more of our kids getting sick. So in terms of how that impacts our providers, unfortunately, it seems to me like it could be worse this year, or at least at the beginning of this year, in terms of lapse and closing programs. Have we seen anything yet on that? I know it's the first day of school or whatever, but do we know what that looks like? Or
I'm glad you brought it up. Yes, we've absolutely already seen it, because a lot of our programs do run 12 months a year. A lot of the preschool programs, a lot of the out-of-school programs, a lot of the summer programs, and they are to report to us through an incident report if there's been an exposure, and they go to the health department to get guidance on exactly what they ought to do and who's quarantined and what classrooms are closed and that sort of thing. And over the last, I'll say, month, it is increased significantly. So, and we're all keenly aware that every time that happens, not only is that disruptive for the center, but that means every kid who is quarantined at home, that throws their family into a tizzy relative to the parents' work and the child care component of what they were expecting. They thought their kid had a safe place to go, and now all of a sudden, the classroom is closed, or the center is closed for as much as 10 days. And it's very, very disruptive. So yes, Mr. Onks, we've absolutely seen that.
Are there any strategies that we can, I mean, I know this is so difficult. Are there any strategies for using our funds, particularly lapsed funds, that might be able to help the families if they're out of work? Or I know we have FSI, but like maybe advertising that more to the providers, like, hey, if you've got a family that's struggling because they're in quarantine or whatever, let us know. We can help with utilities or, I mean, it's.
I don't think we've.
Think about spending our money in a way that can be helpful to these folks.
That's really a good thought. I don't think we've made that particular connection, but there's no reason we shouldn't, because FSI is, it's stood up, it's ready to go. It, in fact, is lapsing funds because of all the federal support for eviction prevention, and because rent is the big ticket item for FSI as well. But there's no reason we couldn't do that. As soon as we find that out and there's communication out to families about a center being closed, we could come up with some standard language that said, if you're struggling with, rent, blah, 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 here's a resource.
I'm just really worried that, with everybody back in school now, it's gonna be worried about that.
I do too. One of the things, and this is, this is sort of, another unknown, and Susan isn't here, but serves on the Early Learning Coalition board. The Early Learning Coalition now is under the Department of Education, and last I knew, the local folks with ELC didn't know what that was going to mean and how things might change. So, as if we needed something else that was unpredictable, that is one of them. Ultimately, it may be really a very good thing, but that transition will be challenging. And we really walk beside ELC in a lot of ways and work collaboratively with them and, work in assistance with them in a lot of ways. So what happens to them will also impact us in what it is we can do. So we're going to have to, as always, remain flexible. One of the other things I just wanted to make you aware, it's a month or two off, or Diana can correct me because she's been working on this timeline. We had been talking about the possibility of doing what I would call an open solicitation or an open RFP. The JWB did something of this general character, I want to say 5 years ago or so. Those of you who've been on the board would remember. It, however, was a single pot of money, and it was very open, as I understand it, to almost all kinds of interventions or programs. What we will be proposing, not proposing today, but just thought I'd get some reaction. What we are looking at is tying everything to the strategic plan and doing probably 3 procurements this year with an attempt for agencies to be selected, programs to be selected, to go into place next October 1st. And then probably only about 6 months after that, actually, is that about right, Diana, starting a second one where those would go into effect March 1st. Now, the magic of those dates are while prevention of child abuse and neglect, and early childhood development. What's the third? I'm not thinking. Strengthening community, absolutely, thank you. Those are not tied to the school year, and so we can do those over the course of this fiscal year, more or less, and they can start October 1st. However, school readiness and school success really need to be programs that kick off when the school year starts, which is more or less mid-August. But to kick off in mid-August, they really need to be selected and stood and beginning, contracts need to be out there in March, maybe April, so that they can begin hiring folks and be ready to go. What we do want to do is allow other agencies who may not have previously had contracts with the Juvenile Welfare Board to have that opportunity. We look forward to the possibility of some new ideas and new approaches so that we're not doing the same thing we've always done. But we want to make sure that we're not getting, as I call it, cats and dogs of all kinds, that it is tied to our strategic plan. So while the specific program may not be underneath our strategic plan, the measurable, the difference it will make should be in one of those five. So, for instance, prevention of child abuse and neglect. There may be different kinds of programs, different approaches, but the measurement of whether it fits in our portfolio and it is something we ought to do is that it's an evidence-based model with the clear belief that it will in fact impact prevention of child abuse and neglect. And I think there'll be more clarity around that, and this board voted on that strategic plan after great care. And what we don't want to see is things scatter out in other directions, while there's so much more yet to be done in the areas of our strategic plan. The other thing we planned, the way in which we plan to do this, largely again this is a huge undertaking. So for our procurement folks, as well as people across the agency who are content experts, each one of these takes a lot of energy. And it takes a lot of energy from the agencies who propose. And we don't want to waste anybody's time. So the way that we're thinking about doing this would be first to have a letter of intent, request a letter of intent within a strategic result area that's maybe only 2 pages long and doesn't have a budget to it yet, but talks about what the concept is, what the idea is, why what they're proposing would make a difference. And we can first grade those, sort through those, and then those with the greatest strength go to round 2, as it were. And round 2 would be a full proposal. And we believe, as we started talking about doing 3 of these at one time, you can imagine some of our staff were, a little tense. It's a lot of work to do. And of course, we have to do it fairly and in the sunshine. But we do believe this first pass, second pass, this LOI, and then the full proposal will help us get the right results in the end, but with less burden. So if somebody proposes something that we just don't think fits the portfolio at all, or we don't see that it's evidence-based, or we see that it's been done in other places but not been successful, we can say no then and not waste the agency's time or our time. So that should be coming. Laura, do you know when that'll be coming to the Finance Committee and the board? Probably, yeah, Diane, I'm sorry.
We should be bringing it back to the board to release in February, and that'll get us to the timeline that we need to be able to bring it back to them to award at the November board meeting.
Okay, so and I didn't hear part of that. The LOI would be released when?
Well, we would bring it back to the board to approve the release of it in February, and so it would go out right after the board meeting, and so that we could bring back the final awards in November.
Okay, in November of next year, okay.
Yes, yeah.
For those first three.
For the final awards, we could, if we want to bring it to the board twice, well,
No, I just
don't
mean
have
for
that
those
date.
first three result areas.
Oh, yes,
That would be
yes.
the schedule.
Correct, yeah.
And you'll find that the second group, the two, will follow not too far behind that.
Yeah.
Because, it won't be a full year after that, because they do need to be able to be ready to stand up with fidelity before the school year. So, whereas this last year, we responded, and I think appropriately, to essentially the crises that were created by COVID, and we don't know. There may well be more of those, and Mr. Ong's brought up, one of those kinds of possibilities. We want to make sure we're moving our strategic plan forward, and this is one of the ways to do that. The last thing I'll mention is there is such a thing as the Community Alliance that is created by statute, and it meets at the county level, but also at the judicial circuit level, and it is intended to be a group of community members and community leaders who oversee is too strong a word, but are paying attention to the child welfare system within that, within Pinellas County or within the district. And it hasn't had a lot of teeth, I think would be a fair statement. But by statute, it does exist, and it is intended to be paying attention to the results within the system. As you already know, because you've seen those reports for months, our child welfare system in this circuit is not in good shape. One of the very significant reasons that is the case is what's often called the funding formula. And the fact is, on pretty much any measure, our district and our county are woefully underfunded, given anything you want to look at. The number of kids who are in the system, the number of kids in the general population, if you wanted to look at that way. Back when child welfare was privatized, it's my understanding that the DCF budgets for the various circuits were used as a guide for what that county or that circuit received, or the lead agency received, in order to, in a privatized environment, to do the work that had previously been done by DCF. We include the Eckerd Connects reports in every board packet, and I think you've seen the significant issues that exist. It appears to be the time when the Community Alliance should not sit idly by and say nothing, and I chair that. So on behalf of the Community Alliance, not on behalf of JWB, but on behalf of the Community Alliance, I'm going to be sending a letter to the Secretary of DCF, just fairly broadly stating our real concern with the results within our county, and concerns relative to the funding formula. I think my understanding is it's pretty well known across the state that the funding formula is not fair, but if there's not more money put in, and there's not a taste to do that, then needless to say, those with more money want to hang on to their money. And so that's been the case for some period of time. And without more money to put on the front end for prevention, for instance, or diversion, you just end up with more kids in care, and that's the most expensive place they can be. So it's sort of a downward spiral that our county and our kids have been experiencing. So it's not going to be a terribly specific letter, but it is going to be one that expresses concern. So I would just want you to know that I'm going to do that. That's all I had, unless you all had other questions of me.
Any questions for Beth? Without putting Linda and April on the spot, could you give us a little bit of an update on the Children's First Cooperman Bogue awards that we have had one meeting on so far?
Yes, so the board approved the award in February for the Dillinger McCabe Leadership Award. And I'm going to look to April, because if I get it wrong, she's going to correct me. But we approved 4 criteria, and the composition of the review committee is the current JWB board chair, past board chair, former board member, and then a representative from each of the McCabe and Dillinger families. And so we've reached out to the families, and Mr. Dillinger has agreed to serve on the committee, and Mrs. McCabe has also agreed to serve on the committee. So we worked together with Mr. McCurrack and Mrs. Ralston and Dr. Sewell, who is going to be our former board member on the committee, to review the nomination form that we put together and the timeline. We're looking to get it out on the street this week, right? This week. With broad breadth. Of course, you will all see it. We're going to ask everybody to take it to all of their networks, because we really are looking to honor a leader in the community that's made a difference for children as part of their lifetime achievement. We're really excited about it. Nominations will be due, I believe, October 1st, and then the committee will review them with the award to be presented at our 75th celebration at the Coliseum on November 12th. Anything you want to add?
The only other, I think, is can you just describe a bit of the criteria of who we're looking for that we will be reviewing for the award?
April, can you pull up the form?
And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because it's the committee had a long discussion about what this award should mean, and we want to make this award uniquely special and very focused on the accomplishments and what was really meant by both those gentlemen while they were here, and what they've done for the community and what they did while being members of the Juvenile Welfare Board. So, April.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, we thoroughly researched similar leadership awards, both locally and across the country. Really, we were trying to strike that balance between making sure that we found that unique individual, that our review team could use the 4 main questions, which I'll share here in a second, and really somebody who is either living or is deceased that really has changed systems, is proven and has demonstrated results for children in our community. So it could be, one of the main criteria, of course, is that the person has to have made this difference for Pinellas County children, and that they can't be a current board member, staff member, or community council member. So all of that will be in the nomination form that we are putting online and will be explained. But the 4 main areas are leadership, again, proven results for leadership over time, excellence. We want to make sure that they have improved quality or extended reach, and we really looked at inclusion, equity, and making sure that programs were more accessible as a result of their leadership. The third one is advocacy and compassion. So, and really, while the board and the committee was looking at developing this, they really channeled Mr. Dillinger and Mr. McCabe. You know, what qualities did these two gentlemen have? And so the individual who receives this inaugural award really needs to have those characteristics, those qualities. And then the fourth one is dedication and determination. So we really are looking to the community, to you all as leaders in our community, to help share across your networks. We have quite an extensive promotional plan in place to outreach to not only current board members, former board members, colleges of law, our chambers of commerce, our foundations. The list goes on and on. We'll be doing that and getting it out on the street, as Linda said, this Friday. It will be, we're trying to make it not too arduous to fill out the form. There are 4 main questions plus an additional comment question. And it can all be done and will all be done electronically online. So I don't know if there are any questions or if you'd like to add anything further, Mr. Mercurak?
No, I think you covered it. So I appreciate, although again, I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I thought it was important for the committee to understand how important this award will be.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Are there any open comments or questions? There is none. Do we have anything else that anyone else would like to bring up before we adjourn? Hearing none,